Hey, so we're hopefully going to finish chapter 5 today of Pirkei Avot. Just keep reminding you that Pirkei Avot originally was 5 chapters, and then for reasons that we'll see next time, a 6th chapter was added. Chapter 5, you'll recall from the last 2 sessions, was unique in that first 4 chapters were basically one rabbi after another, and pretty much in chronological order from the time of the 1st century BCE all the way through the 2nd century. And what we find is that chapter 5 was organized according to numbers. So first we saw tens. These are things that come in tens. Then we moved to sevens. Then we moved to fours. So we now continue, and although it doesn't say it, we're moving into pairs, into dyads, and really dyads, two opposites. So if you've got the Sidur, Lev Shalem, we're on page 255. Any version of Pirkei Avot, we are in chapter 5. We are in Mishnah 18, Yud Chet. Okay, so we begin this way. Kol ahava, all love or any love, shehi tluya b'davar, that's dependent on something, batel davar, if that thing disappears, bitala ahava, then the love will disappear. And the opposite is v'she'ena tluya b'davar. But if you have love that's not dependent on some concrete thing, eina b'tela le'olam, then even if that thing is gone, love doesn't disappear. So what are we talking about? So now they're going to give us 2 pairs which exemplify this concept. Ezo hi ahava, which is the love? Give me an example of love. Hatluya vidavar, that's centered, focused, that's dependent on something in particular. And zo ahavat Amnon v'Tamar. So that's the love of Amnon and Tamar. In case you're not up with it, here's the story. King David had many wives. Many wives bring many, many children. So children of the king have either a full relationship, full brother and sister, or full brothers, full sisters, same father, same mother. But you're also going to have a number of these children who are half brothers and sisters. They share a father, David, but their mother is different. Okay, half, so, it's the Brady Bunch, as it were. So who are Amnon and Tamar? They were half brother and sister, both children of King David. In the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, we read how, 2 Samuel, we read how Amnon became infatuated with his half-sister Tamar. Now, being as it were, the Prince of Wales, he's the one who's supposed to succeed his father, eventually become the king of Israel. This is Amnon. And he's got his own little apartment, his own little house, a little bit away from the palace. In the meantime, he's got a sister, Tamar, half-sister, and Amnon is infatuated with her. But here's the problem. She's a teenage girl. She's being incredibly protected, as young girls were. She's in the palace. She's not allowed to go out on her own. So Amnon, he wants to be, in every sense of the word, with his half-sister, but can't find time to be alone. And he's walking around depressed all of the time. his cousin says, Amnon, well, you look terrible. What's the problem? And he says, I'm in love with my half-sister, but they never let her out of the palace. What am I going to do? So the cousin comes up with a plan. He says, here's what you do. Tell your father, send word to the palace that you're sick, so sick that you can't even show up for the meals. And they'll come and they'll visit you. So that's what happens. David says, well, what's the matter, Amnon? He says, I'm sick. I'm terrible. I can't come down and eat. So David says, well, what can we do? And so Amnon says, well, why don't you send somebody to bring food for me? So David says, I'll send one of the servants. And he said, no, how about Tamar? So David doesn't think twice about this, sends Tamar. She comes and she brings hibachi or something so that she can make food. And there's the retinue that she came with, and there's the people that he has in his own little shack, his apartment. So what happens? She makes the food for him, and then ultimately he says, I'm too weak, feed me, right? So she cuts up his pancakes, she's going to feed him, and he said, I can't eat with people watching me, send them all away. So everybody leaves. He's now left alone with Tamar, and she's trying to innocently feed him. What does he do? He grabs her and comes right out and says, sleep with me. So she's cornered. What's she going to do? There's nobody there. And this is a stronger man who's really pressuring her. She tries everything in the book, every way she can to convince him, don't do it. People don't do these things. You're going to get a bad reputation. It could hurt you. Here's what you need to do. Why don't you just ask your father, our father, David, to create a match? You and I will be married and everything will be great, right? That's not what she wants. She's just trying to get out. And ultimately, he doesn't listen to any of her pleas or her suggestions, and he rapes her. Here's the thing. The minute that his lust is satisfied, he's disgusted with her. More likely, he was disgusted with himself, but he transfers that feeling onto her. And he's sick of her, can't even stand to look at her. He wants to throw her out of the apartment. Meantime, she's bruised, her clothing is ripped, she's bleeding. It's a pretty terrible scene. And what happens? She says, please don't make me walk down the street looking like this. Everybody will know what happened and my reputation will be ruined. And in the meantime, he calls his servant. He says, throw that out of here. Literally, he uses the word it, right? Throw it out of here. Get it out of here. And she's pushed into the street and has to go home. Everybody sees her. Everybody draws the appropriate conclusions. David doesn't know what to do. It's the crown prince. It's his son. Oh, my God. But in the meantime, she's only a girl, forgive me. And what's he going to do? So her full brother, Absalom, he is so angry and upset. He says, don't say anything to anybody. Leave it to me. I will take care of this. And ultimately what happens is her full brother, Absalom, eventually kills the half-brother, Amnon, who raped her. So there we have the example of a case of love, which was based on really lust. And the minute that his lust was satisfied, couldn't stand to look at her, right? So it wasn't really love. It was some kind of infatuation or obsession. And the thing was gone and the love was gone. On the other hand, we're told, V'she'ena tuluya b'davar. What's an example of a love which isn't centered, focused, dependent on one particular thing. Zo ahavat David v'Yehonatan. This is the love of David and Jonathan. Remember, first king of Israel is Saul. His son, his crown prince, is Jonathan. Jonathan's best friend is David. Because David killed Goliath, David is a popular hero, and Saul becomes mentally unbalanced by the fact that people seem to consider David a greater hero than Saul. And on more than one occasion, Saul tries to kill David. And yet, in this situation, despite the fact that Jonathan's father is the king, he realizes his father is wrong, and he sides and he protects his friend Jonathan. I got to tell you that in recent decades, people have questioned and wondered, was the love of David and Jonathan perhaps the love of which we cannot mention its name? In other words, was it a homosexual attraction? There's no evidence for that in the Torah, in the Midrash, but nevertheless, modern people see two young men who are so attached to one another and say, that doesn't seem normal, and come back with, well, it must have been, they were both gay. But from the Torah, the Bible's point of view, it's that this was, two people who deeply cared, two friends. This is the Jewish Damon and Pythias, as it were. Okay, so that's the first Mishnah, and about love and two different fork and two different ways to deal with it. Next Mishnah, Yud Tet, we're dealing not with love, but with disagreements, with conflict. And so we read, Kol machloket. Machloket is the Hebrew or the Yiddish word for an argument, a disagreement, controversy. Shehi l'shem shamayim. If you have a controversy that's for the sake of heaven, in other words, people are arguing, but they're really searching for what is the truth, what is the right path. Okay, sofa lehit kayem. In the end, that controversy will have a lasting value. We don't all have to agree. We can have differing opinions. The question is, are we simply fighting so that I win? Or is it about other things that if I win, that, I'm going to get? Or is it that two sides truly believe that there are two different paths to achieve what they both want? So the opposite is v'she'eina l'shem shamayim. But if you have a controversy, a dispute that's not for the sake of heaven, for a real, good, honest reason, ein sofa lehit kayem. In the end, that disagreement and those people, they will not endure. So now we need the examples. Ezo hi machloket. Give me an example of a disagreement. Shehi l'shem shamayim, and that's for the purpose of heaven, for a good cause. Zo machloket Hillel and Shammai. So that would be an example of, it would be Hillel and Shammai. You'll remember all the way back when we began studying together in the chapter 1 of Pirkei Avot, we talked about Hillel and Shammai. They lived in the 1st century BCE. They were the two leaders of their generation, and they were very different in terms of their personalities, and their personalities impacted the difference in how they interpreted the Torah and Jewish law. By and large, we assume that Hillel was the more liberal and Shammai was the more conservative. You might say that Hillel was a loose constructionist. Shammai was a strict constructionist. When it came to issues of Jewish law, more often than not 100% of the time, but more often than not, Hillel was more liberal and lenient, whereas Shammai was the more, strict. And we saw that in their personalities as well, that Shammai was a tough kind of guy, didn't have too much patience for people he considered idiots, whereas Hillel was warm and open and always inclusive. So what we're told is that kind of disagreement, when Hillel and Shammai argued about Jewish law and disagreed, that was a good thing. And it was good that they challenged one another. That when this side, offers a challenge, the other side is forced to think, to reevaluate, to come up with answers, or to change. And that very process, that give and take, is considered l'shem shamayim, for a good cause. So we are not people who believe that religious education is all about dogma and memorizing the catechism, right? As in the Catholicism. For Jews, it's about two people who are arguing, debating, discussing, trying to understand what's at the bottom of this. What does God really mean? What does God really want? And that's a good thing, as opposed to somebody on high saying, here's the answer, memorize it, don't ask any questions. We always ask questions, as long as you're asking for a good purpose. And then on the other hand, we're told, so give me an example of a controversy, of a conflict, of a debate, right? That's not for the sake of heaven. And the answer is, machloket Korah v'kol adato. The example would be of Korah and his associates, his group. Who was Korah? Korah was a cousin of Moses. And in another week or so, we're going to read from the Torah the portion called Korah. Korah leads a rebellion against Moses. Now, it'd be one thing if somebody said, Moses is a dictator. If somebody said, Moses is not a competent leader, right? But that's not what Korah says. Korah basically says, he's from the tribe of Levi. I'm from the tribe of Levi. Why should he be the boss? I should be the boss just as much as him, more so perhaps. So Korah tried to lead a rebellion to push out Moses. And of course, the point of this was not for the sake of the people, for the sake of God. The point of this is that it was for the sake of Korah, right? He wanted to be the leader. He wanted the ego stroke. So there we're told, in such a case where it's all about Korah and not about the common good, what's going to happen in the end, the controversy and the people involved in it are not going to survive. They're not going to have lasting value. And of course, you remember the story that Korah and 250 of his followers who were trying to depose Moses, the earth literally opens up and swallows them. You may remember 2 weeks ago when we talked about tens, we said that one of the 10 things that God created just before Shabbos, on the week of creation, after Adam and Eve, before Shabbos comes in, was the mouth, that the mouth of the earth, the hole in the earth, that opened up and swallowed Korah and all of his people. Okay, we're moving on. Mishnah number 20. So now we come, speaking about Moses, we come to the following. Kol hamizakeh et harabim. Anybody who leads many people to a life of righteousness. You can say things in Hebrew in a few words that it takes a lot of words to say in English. The word mizakeh, okay, in Hebrew, from the word zechut. Zechut means merit. Mizakeh, because of the grammatical form, means one who causes others to derive benefit. But in Hebrew, it's one word, mizakeh. So anybody who causes other people to derive merit, et harabim, the common, the people, the public, the majority, right? Many people. Anybody who does that, who brings others to this point of merit, ein chet ba liado. Sin, no transgression will follow. But on the other hand, v'chol hamachati, anyone who leads many people into a life of sin, same thing. We all know the word chet, like al chet shechatanu, right? Chet means sin. In Hebrew, you can say the word machati, and it literally means one who causes others to sin. But in Hebrew, you can say all that with one word, hamachati. So a person who brings others, who causes others to sin, machati et harabim, ein maspikim biado. He will never be able la'asot teshuvah, to repent, to return. That if you yourself do something bad, you can turn around. But what are you going to do if you're the one who caused many others to do bad? You can change, but in the meantime, they're often gone doing terrible things. You can repent for yourself, but you can't repent for them, right? And unless they turn around, the sin still falls on you who brought them to sin. So who are we talking about? Because again, our form is a dyad, right? Pairs in each of these Mishnayot. So the first one is Moshe, Moses, Zacha, he merited himself, V'zika et harabim, and he caused the majority, he caused others to have merit. Zechut harabim, and so all the good that other people did that he ultimately brought them to do, tuluya vo. He gets credit for all of the good things that they eventually go off and do because he was the one that taught them, showed them, introduced them. Shene Emar, so where do we get this from? And we're quoting in the book of Deuteronomy, at the very end of the Torah, concerning Moses, it says, Tzidkat Adonai asa. He did righteousness of the Lord. Umishpatav im Yisrael. And God's laws or ordinances with Israel. Who's the opposite of Moses, who caused people to do wrong, caused them to sin, and can therefore never be forgiven? Yerav Am ben Nevat. Now, in Hebrew, you may never have heard of his name. He was a king of Israel. In English, we call him Jeroboam. But in Hebrew, Yerav Am. And he committed a sin, v'hecheti et harabim. And more than that, he caused other people to sin. And therefore, chet harabim, the sin of all those he brought to the wrong path, talui bo, it falls on his head. Okay, and here too we're going to quote a verse from the book of Kings where it actually talks about him. Al chatot Yeravam asher chata, for the sins of Jeroboam which he committed, asher hechati et Yisrael, and caused Israel to sin. What was the sin of Jeroboam? So let's go back. King Solomon, great king, builds the temple, builds the palace. However, he taxes the people. He puts them to work to do all these incredible things. People were going to put up with it with King Solomon. King Solomon dies. His son is Rehoboam. Okay, and he, the young king, now takes the place of his father. And the people come to this new king, young king Rehoboam, and they say, your father taxed us, and it's breaking the bank, and we can't afford it, and he sent us off to work and all these building projects. You got to give us a break. And so Rehoboam goes to his advisors. His father's advisors said, you know what, if you give in a little bit and you relax the burden on the people, they'll love you forever. He goes to his friends, his contemporaries, and he says, what should I do? And he said, don't let the people boss you around. You're king. You show them who's boss. So Rehoboam goes back to the people and he says, if you thought my father was bad, wait till you see what I'm going to do to you. Right? I'm going to double the taxes. I'm going to triple the amount of work that you're going to be called upon to do. So what happens? 10 of the tribes, the northern tribes, say, we're out of here. This is it. We're gone. And they literally secede from the union. And so what used to be one country is now two. In the south, we have King Rehoboam, ruling basically over the tribe of Judah, which was the biggest tribe. But in the north, you have 10 tribes, and they now are called Israel, right? As opposed to Judah. Who was the one who led this rebellion? Who was the one who led the secession? And the answer is Jeroboam, Yeravam. So they split the kingdom. There's the north and there's the south. And what happens, there was one temple. The temple was in Judah, in Jerusalem, in the south. So all the people in the north, in order to go 3 times a year for pilgrimage, they had to go into the south. And they had to pay whatever taxes Rehoboam required them to do. So Jeroboam says, this is not good. So what am I going to do? Let's forget about the temple in Jerusalem. Let's build our own temples. But Israel in the north encompassed 10 tribes, and it was a great distance. So he builds 2 temples, one in Bethel and one way up north in Dan. And here's the thing about these 2 temples. Not only did they violate the Torah rule that there needs to be one temple in Jerusalem where all the people go to. So now there's 3 temples, one in Dan, one in Bethel, one in Jerusalem. And the people in the north are not going to Jerusalem where they're supposed to. More than that, King Jeroboam, Yeravam, builds these golden calves and puts them in the temple in Dan and in the temple in Bethel. So when the people come, and the people in the north, 10 tribes, go to either Dan or Bethel on the pilgrimages, there are these golden calves. Now, you say, wait a minute, is this got this similar thing to the story of Aaron and the golden calf? I got to tell you, because if we know that from the Bible, the golden calf was a terrible thing. Moses came down, saw the golden calf, and he broke the 10 commandments. It's clear that this was a horrible sin. This was wrong. Why would Jeroboam, several centuries later, now put golden calves if he knew it was wrong? So modern biblical scholars tell us that the stories are really reversed. That what happened is, the first thing that took place is that Jeroboam built these idols, these golden calves. Later, the people in the south heard what they were doing up north and said, this is such a terrible thing. What did he do? An author put the golden calf into the ancient story about Moses, right? And said, golden calf. There was a golden calf at the time of Moses, and look what happened. So that was a kind of an editorial comment from the writer who was writing this, not at the time of Moses, but at the time of Jeroboam. And by putting the story into the Moses story, it was a way of pointing at the people up north and saying they're doing this terrible thing. Okay, so that's how modern biblical scholars see the story. So we're told that Jeroboam, because he brought the people not only to not worship in Jerusalem, but to worship golden calves, idols in the north, he had caused them to sin, and it was a terrible thing. He was a terrible person. Okay, we move on to Mishnah 21. Call me sheyesh biado, anybody who has in his hands shlosha dvarim halalu, these three things, mitalmidav shel Avraham Avinu. He is considered a student of Abraham our father. Ushlosha dvarim acherim, but if you have the three opposite things, you are mitalmidav shel Bilam harasha. You are among the students, the disciples, the followers of Bilam, the wicked. In a couple of weeks, we'll read the Torah portion about Bilam. Bilam was a Midianite who was hired by Balak, king of Moab, to put a curse on the Israelites. Famous story of him and his talking donkey. You'll remember from 2 weeks ago, the talking donkey was another of the 10 things created by God after the creation of Adam and Eve, just before the coming of the Sabbath of the first week. So what are the three things that make you just like Abraham? Ayin tova, a good eye. By a good eye, they don't mean 20/20 vision. Good eye means a generous eye. That you look at people, you're happy for their success. You look at people who are in need, and you're generous and willing to give to them. What is the second quality of Abraham? Ruach nimucha. You've got a humble soul. And the third thing is nefesh shifala, a modest appetite. Okay, if you've got those three things, you follow the example of Abraham. Well, the Mishnah here doesn't really say anything about the specifics. Many of the commentators over the centuries say, well, the generosity of Abraham, for instance, he saw 3 people come out of the desert. He brought them into his home. He gave them food, told them to wash up. That's the kind of generous person that he was. Or later, we're told when he rescues Lot and he defeats the people who kidnapped his nephew, and he could have taken all the spoils of war, Abraham basically said, I didn't do this in order to enrich myself. I did this in order to save my family. Right? So there are examples, and for each of these three things, many of the commentators will give examples from the story of Abraham. Then it goes on, and what about the flip side? What makes you into somebody who follows Bilam? Ayin ra'ah, you look at others and you are envious, you're upset, you're angry. After all, Bilam looked at the great people of Israel, and he's ready to put a curse on them. Had it not been for God saying, you better not, Bilam said, these people are wonderful. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov. Look at how beautiful their tents are. I'm going to put the whammy on them. Veruach gavoha, and this notion of somebody who has a highfalutin, he's arrogant in his spirit, v'nefesh rechava, and he always wants more, right? Self-important and arrogant. Ma bein talmidav shel Avraham Avinu. What's the difference between students of Abraham and talmidav shel Bilam harasha? So now we see the reward. If you live like Abraham, what do you get for doing that? We're told, ochlim ba'olam hazeh, you eat in this world, v'nochalin, and you inherit ba'olam haba. In other words, you're going to be rewarded in this world, you will be rewarded in heaven in the world to come. So remember, we're talking sometime around the year 200, maybe a little bit before, maybe a little bit after. And already it's clear that at this moment, there's a belief in Olam Haba, in the world to come, in some kind of heaven. And what's the flip side? We're going to see, by the way, they need to give us a proof of this. How do you know this? It can't be because some rabbi says it, right? It's got to be a text, a quote from the Bible. So we quote from the book of Mishlei, which is Proverbs, and there in chapter 8, verse 21, it says, Avot, talmidav shel Bilam, lahanchil ohave yesh, that I may give an inheritance of abundance to those who love me, ve'otzrotehem amaleh, and I may I fill up their treasury. Okay? Then on the other side, Bilam Harasha, we're told, Yorshin Gehinom. They will inherit Gehinom. Gehinom originally, that if you need a translation in one word, it would be hell. What do we mean by that? Well, the word Gehinom originally comes from Hinnom, two words, Valley of Hinnom, Hinnom Valley, which is just outside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. And it's there that there were idols for Moloch, people who sacrificed little children to the fire god of Moloch, the Moabite fire god. And so therefore, in the Jewish mindset, the worst kind of thing, burning little children equals what we would consider to be hell. Later, the Valley of Hinnom, there was a guy named Hinnom. He owned the real estate there. But because this worship was done there, this came to be known as the Valley of Hinnom, and then later Gehinnom, and later hell. So apparently, at this point, there is a notion that the wicked are somehow punished in the next world in hell. For how long? In what way? We don't have any ideas about devils and pitchforks in Judaism. That's more from Christianity, but they get from us the notion that the wicked are punished. Some say that the wicked, and in fact, not just the wicked, but everyone is punished for a period of up to 12 months, depending on how bad you were in the world to come. And then once you've been purified, you go to heaven in Olam Haba, whatever that is, and that's never really described explicitly. So where do we know this from? And again, in the book of Psalms, Psalm number 55, we see that you, O God, bring them down into the pit of destruction. And that's considered another word for hell. Violent and deceitful, they shall not live out half their days. Well, I, the psalmist says, put my trust in you. Va'ani eftach bach. Okay, so now we come to Mishnah 22. Yehuda ben Tema, Omer. Notice he's not a rabbi or doesn't have the title, simply Judah ben Tema. He says the following, Have ez kanamer, be as bold, right, as a leopard, kal kanesha, as swift as an eagle, ratz katzvi, fleet, nimble as a deer, and gibor ka'ari, and mighty as a lion. Okay, so he picks these four animals: the leopard, the eagle, the deer, and the lion, each which are known for a particular quality. And he says human beings should try to imitate those qualities when it comes to la'asot, to do ritzon avicha shebashamayim, to do the will of your Father in heaven. Now, here we are, 21st century, and we're reading this, and it's, very poetic and it's very lovely, but may not speak to us. But remember that we're dealing with a situation either after the destruction of the temple in the year 70, or after the second rebellion and its fall in the year 132 under Bar Kokhba, when being a Jew was tough and following God's laws was very hard. If the Romans had rules that said you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't even study Torah. We have the famous story that we all read in Eila Ezkara on Yom Kippur afternoon. We read about Hananiah ben Tradion, who's wrapped in a Torah and burned, or Rabbi Akiva, whose skin is peeled from his body. Because why? What did they do? They chose to disagree with the Roman decree, to defy it, and ultimately to teach Torah. They were captured, they were tortured, and they were murdered. So when we read this, it's not meant just as a nice cliche, follow God's teaching. When God's teaching could get you killed, you need to be as bold as a leopard. You need to be as swift as an eagle, as nimble, as fleet as a deer, running, hiding, going from here to there, and as mighty as a lion to perform the will of your Creator in heaven. So it's a beautiful, way of saying, don't just don't just be observant, don't just follow God's law, but sometimes following God's laws can get you killed. Don't let that stop you. Be courageous, be brave, stand up for being a Jew, no matter what it's going to cost you. Hu haya omer, and the same Yehuda ben Tema used to say, az panim legehinom. Those who are insolent, they will end up in hell, in Gehinom. Uboshet panim legan Eden. But those who are shy, reserved, they will end up in the Garden of Eden, another Hebrew way of saying heaven. And then we're told, Yehi ratzon mifanecha Adonai Eloheinu. May it be the will of God, of the Lord our God. Shetivne yircha b'meherah. May you rebuild your city quickly b'yameinu, in our day. V'tein chalkenu, and give us the portion b'toratecha, to observe your Torah. So that's almost a hint that this is a statement that's not just a statement about being observant. It's about being defiant in order to be a Jew, defiant of the Romans who don't want you to be. Okay, next Mishnah, very interesting, 23. Some of you, everybody probably, is aware of Shakespeare, The 7 Ages of Man. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. And then Shakespeare speaks about the 7 different ages of man. And so first is the infant, then is the schoolboy, then is the lover, then is the soldier, then is the justice, then is the lean and slippered pantaloon. And then finally, second childishness and mere oblivion, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. Okay, so very famous. Here we have the Jewish version, which precedes Shakespeare by about 1,500 years. Listen to what it says. Hu haya omer, same guy, Yehuda ben Tema. Ben chamesh shanim, when you're 5 years old, la mikra. That is the stage for learning Torah. In other words, elementary school. And what did they learn in elementary school? They learned the Torah. First, the book of Leviticus, by the way. Then the next stage, Ben Eser la Mishnah. When you get to be 10 years old, you now study Mishnah. Okay, so you move from the stories of the Torah to the laws of the Mishnah. We're moving from elementary school to perhaps middle school. Ben Shalosh Esrei la Mitzvot. When you are 13 years old, 4 mitzvot. I got to tell you that clause is the only clause. There's nothing in the Bible. This is the only clause in the rabbinic literature, in the Mishnah or the Talmud, that is the basis for bar mitzvah, right? What does it say? When you are 13 years old, la mitzvah, then you are obligated to observe the commandments. That's all it says. There's nothing about a ceremony. There's nothing about a party. There's nothing about invitations. There's all 13 means is you now have to obey, fulfill, perform the mitzvot in the Torah. They figured when you become an adolescent, when you hit puberty, that's the time to do it. And this phrase, those 4 words, Ben Shalosh Esrei la Mitzvot, that's the only basis in classical Judaism for a bar mitzvah. From what we know from historians, it may very well be that it's not until the 12th century in France that we actually have a ceremony. But from the 2nd century, there was an expectation that once you're 13, now you got to start fasting on Yom Kippur, you got to do all the other mitzvot. We go on. Ben chamesh esrei leTalmud. When you're 15, equivalent of high school, I guess, then you start Talmud. What's the difference between Mishnah and Talmud? Mishnah is simply short statements, here's the law. Talmud are complicated arguments back and forth about the meaning of the law. Okay, we go on. Ben Shmona Esrei lechuppah. When you are 18, you go to the chuppah. In other words, you get married when you're 18. Now remember, if people generally lived, the average was they lived until their 40s or 50s, you weren't going to wait until your 30s to get married. And perhaps the notion that once you become sexually interested, we don't want you to wait until you're in your late 20s or 30s until you have a legitimate outlet for your sexual desires. So they set people up by the age of 18. Then we're told, Ben Esrim Lirdof, when you are 20 years old, to pursue a livelihood. We might have thought it's the other way around, because in our world, it is the other way around. You go to college, you get a job, you begin to put away some money, then you get married when you're in your late 20s, early 30s. Okay, that's not the way they did it. You get married early, and then, not too long after, you find your career. Ben Shloshim Lakoach, when you are 30, that is the height of your power. Ben Arba'im Labina, when you're 40, that's when you get true understanding because of your life's experience. Ben Chamishim La'etza, when you reach the age of 50, then that's when you know enough to be able to offer advice and counsel to others. Ben Shishim lazikna. When you hit 60, that's old age. Interesting, 2,000 years ago, that's how they defined old age. When you hit 60, we might say 60 is the new 40. Ben shivim la seva. If you made it to 70, that was when your hair turned white. Ben shmonim ligvura. This is an interesting statement. When you're 80, it's power, it's strength, gvura, right? Again, from the idea of heroics, of power. It could be that if you make it to that 80 years old, it's because you must be constitutionally very strong. Or it could be an ironic statement, right? That if you make it that long, then it's gvura. When you are 90, ben tishim lasuach, 90 you are bent over, and ben mea, when you're 100, ki'ilu mate, you might as well be dead. Ve'avar batel min ha'olam, and gone from this world. Not sure we like the way they see the golden years, but again, who knows what reality was in the 1st and 2nd century. We now come to Mishnah 24, Ben Bog Bak. So first note, this guy's got a funny name, Bog Bak. Number 2, he's got no first name. Number 3, he's not a rabbi. So Ben Bog Bak. What's the deal with his name? And many people tell us that Bog is an abbreviation. Bet Gimel Bog stands for Ben Ger, son of a convert. So in other words, Ben Bog Bak is the son of a convert of the son of a convert. That here's somebody whose family were converts to Judaism. So Ben Bog Bak Omer, Hafoch ba, turn it, V'hafach ba, and turn it, Dekula ba, for everything is in it. He doesn't tell us what we're turning and what we're looking for, right? But it's understood that he's talking about Torah. Everything you need to know is in the Torah. And when you study Torah, turn it upside down, inside out, study it, tear it apart, put it back together. That's the essence of Torah. Uva techazeh, and scrutinize it. Always look to it. V'sivu v'aleva, grow old and gray in it. Umine lo tazua, never depart from Torah. She'ein lecha midah tova himena, for you have nothing better in life than this. And the fact that this comes from somebody who was a convert, right, makes it even more powerful that a convert is telling the born Jews, Torah is everything, right? I grew up in something different, and then I came to this, and I studied it, and believe me, Torah is everything. Study it, make it your life, not something that you do up to the age of bar mitzvah and then you're done, and not even something that you do occasionally, if you come to shul. But it's something that you're constantly studying and understanding and deriving inspiration from. And then finally, we come to the last line of chapter 5. We're in Mishnah 25, Ben Hey. So if you thought Ben Bog Bak was funny, right, how about Ben Hey? So what's Hey? So we have a notion that it's probably along the same lines. Some people say Ben Hey is really Ben Bog Bak. Other people say it was another guy who was also a convert. So Hey is the 5th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Why would Hey be a name, and why would that be a hint about being a convert? So one answer is that Hey is often used as an abbreviation of God's name. So here's somebody who converted and took the name, a son of God. But the other thing, which is fascinating, is the idea that when two people from the town of Ur in Mesopotamia ultimately left their home and came to the land of Canaan and began following God, which two people, Avram and Sarai, they had their names changed. Avram, they add a hey to his name, and now he's the first Jew. Avram, with a hey, becomes Avraham. Sarai gets her name changed. Instead of the yud, we have a hey. She becomes Sarah. So by adding hey to Abraham and to Sarah, right, they became the first Jews. And so Ben-Hey perhaps was saying that I'm going to follow their example by taking on this double hey as a name to show who it is I'm following. And he's got only 3 words to say to us, which are lefum tsa'ara agra. This is not Hebrew, this is Aramaic. Maybe as a convert, he was having trouble learning Hebrew, and so he spoke in the more common language, not the scholarly language of study and of prayer, but the common language of the people, which was Aramaic. And so he says, lefum tsa'ara, according to the suffering is the agra, is the reward. You want to know, and again, he's speaking perhaps not only about what it takes to become a convert to Judaism. It's hard. In Islam, you want to become a Muslim, all you got to do is say 3 times with belief, there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. If you say that and you believe it, you're in. In Christianity, what do you got to do? You get baptized and you accept Jesus as your Savior, and you're in. To be a Jew, you got to get circumcised, you got to keep kosher, you can't work on Shabbos, 613 commandments. Maybe the convert is saying, according to the suffering, according to the trouble, according to the difficulty is the reward. Yeah, it's tough being a Jew, but it's incredibly rewarding. Or maybe Ben-Hey was put in at the end of what would have been the end of Pirkei Avot. Because remember, this is the end of the 5th chapter. Originally, there were only 5 chapters. And this would be the end. We give to the convert the last word. And if most of this is a message to the rabbis and about being a rabbi, about living a life of Torah, Ben-Hey is talking about Torah. And it follows what Ben Bog Bak just said. Everything is in it. Turn it inside out, upside down. Everything is in the Torah. Ben-Hey says, and it ain't easy. But the harder it is, the more you struggle, the greater will be the reward. So that's the end of chapter 5. Next week, we'll begin 6, and we'll talk about why they added the 6th chapter and what it's all about. Till then, I'll see you.